It was a political scandal that changed our country forever, beginning with the break-in at Democratic National Headquarters in the Watergate office complex.
Political crime story of the century.
In just a moment now, the President of the United States will begin his speech, perhaps his last speech from the White House.
And his motto, I believe, was, "Do unto others before they have a chance to do unto you."
That's enough.
He didn't just lie, he listened. Every room, every phone call, every conversation. Richard Nixon wasn't the first president to be paranoid, but he was the first to turn that paranoia into a fully operational system of surveillance, deception, and self-destruction. He bugged the White House, then lied about it. And when the truth finally came out, it didn't just end a presidency. It shattered the nation's faith in government. Because before Watergate was a scandal, before it was a break-in, it was a mindset. Nixon didn't trust anyone, and that fear would bring down everything he built. It started with suspicion. Nixon always felt like an outsider. Even as vice president under Eisenhower, he believed the Washington elite looked down on him. He came from modest beginnings. He wasn't glamorous. He wasn't born into wealth or pedigree. He worked for everything he had, and he never forgot how quickly it could be taken away. That chip on his shoulder hardened over the years into full-blown resentment. He believed the press was against him, that the Democrats were cheating, that the deep state wasn't just real, it was targeting him personally. So he decided to fight back the only way he knew how, by controlling every word, every whisper, and every threat that crossed his path.
The scandal that took down a president, a plot of lies, espionage, and secret dealings that shattered how the nation viewed the presidency and the truth.
Had it not been for Watergate, I think this man could have gone down in history as one of the more significant presidents in the history of this country.
I must put the interests of America first. Therefore, I shall resign the presidency.
In February 1971, Nixon made the decision that would haunt him forever. He ordered a secret taping system to be installed in the White House, not just in the Oval Office, but in the Cabinet Room, in his private office at the Executive Office Building, and on certain telephones. The system was voice-activated. When someone entered the room and started speaking, the tape rolled. Conversations with staff, calls with foreign leaders, discussions of war, peace, politics, revenge, it was all recorded, and Nixon never told anyone. Why would he? He didn't install the system for transparency. He installed it for control, for leverage, for legacy. He wanted a record he could use against his enemies, or even his allies, if needed. He wanted to write his own version of history. What he didn't realize was that those tapes would one day write it for him. In June 1972, 5 men broke into the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. They were caught inside the office, wearing gloves, carrying cash, and attempting to bug the phones.
It all started here, the now infamous Watergate office building, when police were called to investigate a strange break-in.
On June 17, 1972, there was a break-in at the Democratic National Committee's headquarters in the Watergate office complex.
There was bugging devices, tear gas pens, many rolls of film, locksmith tools, thousands of dollars in $100 bills.
At first, the incident barely made headlines, just another political stunt gone wrong. But slowly, journalists at the Washington Post, most famously Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, began to dig deeper. The money traced back to Nixon's re-election campaign. The burglars had connections to the CIA. The story grew. And Nixon? He denied everything. Over the next year, the president gave speech after speech, insisting he had no knowledge of the break-in, that no one in the White House was involved, that the press was on a witch hunt. Behind the scenes, though, Nixon and his aides were scrambling. They paid hush money. They ordered the FBI to back off. They tampered with evidence. It was the cover-up, not the crime, that turned a bungled break-in into a constitutional crisis.
Woodward and Bernstein were assigned to this burglary just as a matter of routine.
Editors kind of said, we got this strange burglary. They sent me to the courthouse where the 5 burglars caught in the Democratic headquarters were being arraigned.
Up the ladder in the Washington Post.
When you talk about the people who made a difference when it came to Watergate, you talk about Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein.
And then came the tapes. In 1973, during a Senate investigation into Watergate, it was revealed that Nixon had been recording conversations in the Oval Office. The moment the words left the witness's mouth, the room froze. There was audio, proof, and not just of Watergate, but of everything. The country had never seen anything like it. A sitting president secretly taping everyone around him, then lying about it. It didn't just feel corrupt, it felt dystopian. The investigators demanded the tapes. Nixon refused. He cited executive privilege, national security. He even offered to provide summaries instead of the actual audio, summaries that his own staff would write. Nobody bought it. Eventually, the case reached the Supreme Court. In a unanimous decision, they ordered Nixon to turn over the tapes. He had no choice. What those tapes revealed was worse than anyone imagined. Nixon wasn't just aware of the cover-up, he was directing it. On June 23, 1972, just days after the Watergate break-in, Nixon and his chief of staff, H.R. Haldeman, were caught discussing how to get the CIA to shut down the FBI investigation. This became known as the smoking gun tape. In that single conversation, Nixon was heard abusing the power of the presidency to obstruct justice. It destroyed whatever credibility he had left. The House began preparing articles of impeachment, one for obstruction of justice, one for abuse of power, one for contempt of Congress. Nixon's allies in the Senate began abandoning him. Polls showed that even Republican voters were turning. And through it all, the audio kept leaking. Hours of tapes filled with foul language, casual racism, political scheming, and the unmistakable sound of a man drunk on power. In August 1974, with the votes stacked against him and the country in turmoil, Nixon finally resigned. He became the first and only U.S. president to do so. He left the White House the next day, head down, waving goodbye from Marine One. Just like that, the most powerful man in the world fell from grace. His successor, Gerald Ford, would later pardon him, saying the country needed to move on. But the damage had already been done. Trust in government plummeted, cynicism skyrocketed, voter turnout dropped. The word Watergate became shorthand for scandal, secrecy, and betrayal. And the tapes? They were real. They weren't rumors. They weren't second-hand accounts. They were Nixon, in his own voice, plotting in the shadows, lying in public, and incriminating himself in the process. The very thing he installed to secure his legacy ended up destroying it. The most chilling part of the whole saga is that Nixon didn't think he was doing anything wrong. He believed he was justified, that he had to protect himself, protect the presidency, protect the country from the enemies he saw around every corner. That's what makes it a tragedy. Nixon was brilliant, paranoid, calculating, insecure, and in the end, completely consumed by his own fear of losing power. Even today, echoes of his story linger. Every time a leader attacks the press, invokes executive privilege, or claims to be above the law, we're reminded of Nixon, of the tapes, of how easy it is to fall into the trap of thinking power is a shield, that the office is untouchable, that the truth can be managed, edited, spun. But the microphones are always rolling. The legacy of Richard Nixon is a warning, not just about what one man did, but about what any leader could do if fear is allowed to outrun accountability. He bugged the White House. He lied to the nation. And in the end, the only thing that truly betrayed him was his own voice.